My wedding dress wasn't just a dress. It was the last thing my grandmother ever made with her own hands. Every stitch, every pearl, every piece of lace carried a story. So imagine my shock when I opened the closet one Saturday morning and found nothing but an empty hanger. When I asked my mother where it was, she smiled. "Oh, don't be dramatic. I sold it. And honestly, your sister deserved that honeymoon more than an old dress sitting in a closet." That was the exact moment I realized. I didn't lose a wedding dress. I lost the last illusion that my mother would ever choose me. But what she didn't know was that selling that dress would cost her far more than she ever imagined. Growing up, there were always two different sets of rules inside our house. One for my younger sister, Vanessa, and another for me. If Vanessa broke something, it was an accident. If I made the smallest mistake, it proved I wasn't responsible. If Vanessa wanted something, my parents somehow found the money. When I needed something, I was told to work harder. For years, I convinced myself it wasn't favoritism. Maybe my sister just needed more help. Maybe mom was stressed. Maybe I was imagining things. Children become experts at explaining away unfairness because admitting the truth hurts too much. I learned very young that asking for fairness only made things worse. So I stopped asking. I got scholarships, worked after school, paid for my own college books, bought my own first car, even paid the deposit on my first apartment without asking anyone for help. Meanwhile, Vanessa floated through life like someone walking on invisible cushions. Every mistake became someone else's responsibility. Failed college? Mom blamed the professors. Quit another job? The manager was jealous. Maxed out another credit card? Young people make mistakes. Every excuse made her more entitled. Every rescue convinced her she'd never have to grow up. And my mother loved every second of it. Sometimes I wondered if Mom saw Vanessa as the daughter she wanted, and me as the reminder of every sacrifice she regretted making. No matter how successful I became, nothing was ever enough. The only person who truly believed in me was my grandmother, Eleanor. She never compared us, never played favorites. Whenever I visited her little cottage, she'd hug me so tightly I forgot the rest of the world existed. She taught me how to sew, how to bake, how to stand up for myself. But more importantly, she taught me that your worth doesn't depend on someone else's approval. When I got engaged to Daniel, Grandma cried before I did. She held both my hands and smiled through happy tears. "I've been waiting for this day since you were 5. A few weeks later, she asked me to come over. She led me into her sewing room. Boxes of fabric surrounded us. Old photographs covered one wall. And sitting in the middle of the room was the most beautiful wedding dress I'd ever seen. Elegant ivory satin, delicate lace sleeves, tiny pearls sewn one by hand. She'd been working on it for nearly a year. "I wanted you to have something nobody could ever replace." I couldn't even speak. I just hugged her. That dress wasn't expensive because of designer labels. It was priceless because it held thousands of hours of love. Sadly, Grandma passed away only 4 months later. Cancer moved faster than anyone expected. The wedding dress became my most treasured possession. Whenever I touched it, I could almost hear her voice. It wasn't just something I'd wear once. It was my connection to her. A reminder that someone in this family had loved me without conditions. Mom didn't seem to understand that. Or maybe she simply didn't care. The months before my wedding were hectic. Daniel and I worked long hours while renovating our small house. Sometimes I'd leave home before sunrise and come back after dark. Mom offered to help. "I'll keep your dress safe until the wedding." I hesitated. Something inside me whispered no. But she was my mother. Surely she understood what that dress meant. So I agreed. One decision. One mistake. That was all it took. About 6 weeks before the wedding, Vanessa announced that she and her husband were planning a luxury honeymoon in the Maldives. 5-star resort, private villa, ocean views, business class flights. The price nearly made me choke. Everyone asked the obvious question. How are you paying for all that? Vanessa laughed. Oh, we'll figure it out. Whenever she said those words, it usually meant someone else was about to pay. Sure enough, a week later Mom started dropping hints. You've always been good with money. Family should support family. You can always earn more. I already knew where the conversation was going. When I politely refused, Mom looked offended. You care more about money than your own sister. That sentence followed me my entire childhood. Whenever I said no, I became selfish. Whenever Vanessa demanded something, she became the victim. I ignored the guilt trip. I had my own wedding to pay for. And besides, adults should finance their own vacations. The next Saturday, I stopped by my parents' house to pick up the dress for its final fitting. Mom was drinking coffee like it was an ordinary morning. She barely looked up. Morning. I smiled. I'm here for Grandma's dress. For one strange second, silence filled the kitchen. Mom slowly placed her coffee cup down. Then she sighed, almost as if I were inconveniencing her. Oh, about that. A knot formed in my stomach. I sold it. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain refused to believe the words I'd just heard. What? She shrugged. It was just a dress. The buyer offered a great price. Vanessa really deserved a proper honeymoon. I felt my knees weaken. No. No, tell me where it is. I'll buy it back. She rolled her eyes. Already gone. Stop acting like someone died. Something inside me shattered. Because someone had died. My grandmother. And now the last gift she'd left me was gone too. I looked at my mother, waiting for even a hint of regret. There was none. Only annoyance. As if I were overreacting. As if years of memories could be replaced with money. That's when I realized. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't desperation. It was a choice. She had looked at the most meaningful thing I owned, calculated its value, and decided my sister's luxury vacation mattered more. I walked out without another word. Behind me, I heard Mom call after me. You'll thank me one day. No. She had no idea what she had just started. I sat in my car outside my parents' house for nearly 20 minutes. I wasn't crying anymore. The tears had stopped the second my mother admitted what she'd done. Instead, I felt something colder. Something heavier. Disappointment. Not because she had sold the dress, but because she truly believed she'd done nothing wrong. I kept replaying her words in my head. It was just a dress. No, it wasn't. It was the last piece of my grandmother that I could still touch. And she had traded it for a week at a beach resort. My phone buzzed. Daniel. I stared at the screen before answering. Hey, he said softly. You got the dress? I couldn't speak. There was silence. Then he immediately knew. What happened? My mom sold it. The line went completely quiet. What? She sold Grandma's dress to pay for Vanessa's honeymoon. Daniel didn't interrupt. He simply listened while I explained everything. When I finished, he spoke in a calm voice I'd only heard a few times before. Come home. We'll figure this out. When I walked through our front door, Daniel wrapped his arms around me before I even took off my shoes. He didn't tell me to calm down. He didn't tell me to forgive anyone. He didn't say, she's still your mother. Instead, he whispered, I'm so sorry. Sometimes that's exactly what someone needs. Not advice. Not solutions. Just someone willing to hurt beside you. That night we barely slept. Around midnight, Daniel asked the question I had been avoiding. Did she tell you who bought it? I shook my head. No. But somebody knows. The next morning I drove back. Mom answered the door with a smile that disappeared the second she saw me. I already told you. It's gone. I don't want the money. I want the name. She crossed her arms. Why? So I can buy it back. She laughed. I doubt you could afford it now. Something about that sentence felt strange. Now? What do you mean now? She quickly looked away. Nothing. No. That wasn't nothing. She had almost revealed something. I'll ask one more time. Who bought my dress? I don't remember. She smiled. That fake smile. The one she used whenever she lied. You don't remember selling a handmade wedding dress worth thousands of dollars? It wasn't worth thousands. Again. Another lie. Grandma had documented every hour she spent making it. Professional seamstresses had estimated its value years earlier. Mom knew exactly what it was worth. She also knew she hadn't sold it cheaply. I left before I said something I'd regret. But one thing had become clear. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting someone else. 3 days later, my Aunt Linda called. I heard about the dress. News traveled fast in our family. I can't believe your mother. You knew. No. But your cousin mentioned seeing Vanessa carrying a huge garment bag into her SUV last week. I froze. A garment bag? Yes. And your mom was with her. My heart started racing. If Vanessa had the dress, then Mom hadn't sold it immediately. She'd lied. That afternoon, I drove past Vanessa's house. I wasn't planning anything dramatic. I simply wanted answers. Her SUV sat in the driveway. The garage door was halfway open. As I walked toward the front porch, I noticed something. Inside the garage, a familiar ivory fabric peeked out from behind stacked moving boxes. I couldn't breathe. It was the dress. Still inside Grandma's garment bag. She hadn't sold it. She'd hidden it. Before I could think, Vanessa stepped outside. She immediately blocked the garage. What are you doing here? My dress. She frowned. What dress? The one behind those boxes. I saw it. For a split second. Fear flashed across her face. Then came anger. You don't deserve it. Those words hit harder than I expected. What? She folded her arms. You already have everything. A good job. A nice fiancé. A house. You always win. For once, Mom wanted something to be about me. I stared at her. You stole Grandma's dress. No. Mom gave it to me. It was hers to sell. No. It wasn't. Grandma left it to me. Vanessa shrugged. So, that single word told me everything. She genuinely believed she was entitled to anything she wanted, even if it belonged to someone else. I reached toward the garment bag. She shoved my arm away. Don't touch it. I'm taking what's mine. She laughed. No, you're not. We already have a buyer. Buyer? Again? You said Mom gave it to you. She did. But selling it was my idea. There it was. The truth. The honeymoon hadn't created the betrayal. The honeymoon had simply revealed it. They'd planned this together. I took out my phone. Vanessa immediately stepped back. Are you recording me? Yes. She lunged toward the phone. Daniel appeared from behind my car. He calmly stepped between us. I think that's enough. Vanessa stopped instantly. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of witnesses. That evening we watched the recording several times. She had admitted. Mom gave her the dress. She admitted they planned to sell it. It wasn't enough for court, but it was enough to prove they had lied. Still, I wanted the dress back. Not revenge. Not yet. Just Grandma's dress. Daniel had an idea. What if we find the buyer before they do? But we don't know who it is. We'll figure it out. For the next week, our evenings turned into detective work. We searched bridal boutiques, luxury consignment stores, private wedding groups, collectors, vintage clothing dealers. Nothing. Every lead ended with another dead end. Until Daniel remembered something. Your grandmother used that tiny embroidery shop downtown. Mrs. Evelyn. She had helped Grandma repair vintage lace. Maybe, just maybe, she knew something. The little shop hadn't changed in years. The same wooden shelves. The same smell of fabric and lavender. Mrs. Evelyn smiled warmly when she saw me. I was wondering when you'd come. You know? She nodded sadly. Your mother came here. She asked me to authenticate the dress. My stomach dropped. Did you? I refused. Why? Because I knew your grandmother made it for you. Tears filled my eyes. You knew. Of course. She talked about you every single week. Mrs. Evelyn disappeared into the back room. When she returned, she handed me a business card. I wasn't supposed to give you this. It's the antique broker your mother contacted. They decided not to buy it. I looked at the name. Harold Whitmore. One of the biggest heirloom clothing collectors in the state. The next morning I drove 2 hours to meet him. Mr. Whitmore welcomed me into his office. Before I could explain, he said, "You're Eleanor's granddaughter. You have her eyes." I smiled for the first time in days. "You knew my grandmother?" "Very well. She made extraordinary work." I showed him photos of the dress. His expression immediately darkened. "Your mother offered this to me." "You refused." "I did." "Why?" "Because she lied." "What did she say?" "She claimed it had belonged to her." "And?" I knew that wasn't true. He opened a folder. Inside was a copy of Grandma's original design sketches, ownership notes, fabric receipts, and a handwritten letter. My hand shook. "What's this?" "Eleanor asked me to keep it until after the wedding." I stared at him. "My wedding?" He nodded. "She wanted it to be your surprise." I carefully unfolded the letter. The first line immediately blurred through my tears. "To my beautiful granddaughter." Grandma knew. She knew exactly what kind of family I lived in. She knew one day someone might try to take away what she'd made for me. And she'd planned for it. At the bottom of the letter was a sentence that changed everything. "If anyone ever claims this dress belongs to them, the legal ownership papers are filed with my attorney." I looked up at Mr. Whitmore. He smiled. "I think your grandmother was one step ahead of everyone." For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just grieving. I had hope. Because my grandmother hadn't only left me a dress. She had left me proof. And somewhere, my mother and sister still believed they'd won. They had absolutely no idea what was coming next. I didn't open the rest of Grandma's letter until I got back to my car. I wanted to be alone. Some memories deserve silence. I sat behind the steering wheel with shaking hands and carefully unfolded the yellowed paper. The handwriting was instantly familiar. Every loop, every curve. It felt like she was sitting beside me again. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means your wedding day is close, or something has gone terribly wrong." A lump formed in my throat. She knew. She had somehow prepared for both possibilities. "I have loved you since the day you were born. I know life inside our family has never been fair to you." I stopped reading. She knew. All those years I wondered if anyone noticed. Grandma had noticed everything. "You always smiled through disappointment. You never complained when others received more. You worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Never let anyone convince you that kindness is weakness." Tears rolled down my cheeks. Those words healed something I hadn't realized was broken. Then I reached the final page. "The wedding dress belongs to you alone. My attorney has the ownership documents, photographs of every stage of construction, and my signed declaration. If anyone attempts to claim or sell it without your permission, they are committing theft." I stared at those words. Theft. Not a family disagreement. Not favoritism. Theft. Grandma had made sure there would be no confusion. Mr. Whitmore gently knocked on my car window. "You okay?" I nodded, wiping my eyes. "I think my grandmother just saved me." He smiled. "That sounds exactly like Eleanor." Before I left, he handed me another envelope. "She asked me to give you this if you ever needed proof." Inside were high-resolution photographs of Grandma sewing the dress. Some showed me standing beside her years earlier, laughing while holding lace. The dates were printed on every picture. There would be no arguing with evidence like this. That afternoon, Daniel met me outside the attorney's office. His eyes widened when he saw the folder. "You found something." "I found everything." We spent nearly 2 hours meeting with Grandma's attorney. Mr. Lawson was already expecting us. "I've been wondering when this day would come." "You knew?" He nodded. "Your grandmother trusted me with several documents." He unlocked a filing cabinet. then placed 3 folders on his desk. One was labeled, Wedding Dress Ownership. The second, Personal Letter. The third, made my heart stop, Family Financial Records. What is this? Mr. Lawson sighed. Your grandmother asked me not to release these unless certain events occurred. What events? If your mother ever tried to use Eleanor's property for someone else's benefit. Daniel looked at me. Neither of us spoke. Mr. Lawson opened the folder. Bank statements, checks, transfer receipts. Year after year, Grandma had quietly loaned my parents money. Medical bills, mortgage payments, credit card debt, car repairs. Thousands. No, hundreds of thousands of dollars over nearly 20 years. My mother had always claimed she sacrificed everything for the family. The truth? Grandma had rescued them over and over again. Then we found something even worse. A handwritten agreement, signed by my mother. It clearly stated, the wedding dress shall remain the exclusive property of Emily after Eleanor's passing. My own mother had signed it. She knew exactly who owned the dress. She had lied directly to my face. I leaned back in the chair. I don't even recognize her anymore. Mr. Lawson looked sympathetic. Sometimes greed changes people. No, I whispered. I think it just reveals who they've always been. As we drove home, Daniel stayed unusually quiet. Finally, he asked, what do you want to do? I want my dress back. And after that? I looked out the window. I don't know. The truth was, I wanted justice. But I didn't want revenge to consume me. Grandma wouldn't have wanted that. Still, actions have consequences. And for once, my mother needed to experience hers. 3 days later, my phone rang. Mom. I almost ignored it. Curiosity won. Hello. Her voice sounded strangely cheerful. I've been thinking. I found another wedding dress. It's beautiful. I'll even pay half. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. She actually thought replacing Grandma's handmade dress with something from a bridal boutique fixed everything. I don't want another dress. Oh, Emily. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. No. You did that. Silence. Then came the guilt. Family forgives. I took a slow breath. Family doesn't steal. Click. I ended the call. An hour later, Vanessa sent a text. You're ruining everyone's happiness over fabric. I replied with one sentence. It wasn't fabric. It was evidence. Then I blocked her. The next morning, my cousin Rachel called. You'll never believe what's happening. What? Your mom's telling everyone you donated the dress. I almost dropped my coffee. What? She says you decided it didn't fit anymore. And that she helped find it a good home. Another lie. A bigger one. She wasn't just covering up what she'd done. She was rewriting history. Daniel smiled. Keep letting her talk. Why? The more lies she tells, the harder she'll fall. A week later, my Aunt Linda invited the entire family to her 60th birthday dinner. Normally, I would have declined. But this time, I accepted immediately. Not because I wanted drama. Because I knew exactly what would happen. Mom loved performing. Family gatherings were her stage. She would absolutely repeat the lie. And this time, I'd be ready. The restaurant buzzed with conversation. Everyone hugged, laughed, shared stories. Mom acted as if nothing had happened. She even kissed my cheek. You look lovely. I simply smiled. Across the table, Vanessa couldn't meet my eyes. Good. That meant she knew. Halfway through dinner, Aunt Linda asked an innocent question. So, how's wedding planning? Mom answered before I could. Oh, everything's wonderful. Emily even donated her grandmother's wedding dress. So generous. Several relatives smiled. A few praised me. I slowly placed my fork down. The room became quiet. I looked directly at my mother. That's interesting. She smiled confidently. Because that's not what the legal documents say. Her smile disappeared. What? I calmly reached into my bag, pulled out one folder, then another. Then Grandma's letter. Finally, the signed ownership agreement. I placed them on the table, one by one. No yelling, no accusations, just facts. Grandma legally left the dress to me. You signed this document acknowledging that. And according to her attorney, the unauthorized sale qualifies as theft. The restaurant became completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. My mother stared at the papers as if they had appeared by magic. Vanessa whispered, "Mom," for the first time in my life. She looked afraid, not embarrassed. Afraid, because lies can survive arguments. They cannot survive proof. And I wasn't finished yet. I looked around the table, then quietly said, "I also know where Grandma's money really went." Every face turned toward my mother. She slowly pushed her chair back. "Emily, not here." I met her eyes. "You should have thought about that before selling something that never belonged to you." She stood up so quickly her chair nearly fell over. "We're leaving." Vanessa followed. Neither touched their food. Neither looked back. The dining room stayed silent long after they were gone. Then Aunt Linda looked at me. "Emily, how much don't we know?" I looked down at the thick folder of financial records. More than any of us ever imagined. The restaurant stayed silent long after my mother and Vanessa walked out. Nobody reached for their food. Nobody continued their conversations. For years, my mother had controlled every family gathering. She decided what stories were told. She decided who looked like the hero. And she decided who became the villain. For the first time, she had walked away without controlling the ending. My Aunt Linda slowly reached for the folder lying on the table. "Emily, may I?" I nodded. She carefully opened the first page. Every few seconds her eyes grew wider. Then she whispered, "Oh my God." My uncle leaned over her shoulder. "What is it?" She handed him the papers. He read in complete silence. One by one, the documents passed around the table. Nobody interrupted. Nobody defended my mother. Every page revealed another secret. Another loan. Another unpaid debt. Another lie. My cousin Rachel looked at me. She told everyone Grandma barely had enough money to survive. I nodded. I believed that too. But according to these records, Grandma had quietly helped my parents for almost 20 years. Mortgage payments, medical bills, Vanessa's college tuition, a new SUV, credit card balances, even the down payment on Vanessa's first condo. My stomach turned. All those years, Mom had insisted everything came from her sacrifices. The truth? Most of it had come from Grandma. Aunt Linda wiped away a tear. "Eleanor never told us." "No." I smiled sadly. Because she never wanted anyone to feel guilty. That sounded exactly like Grandma. She helped because she loved people, not because she expected recognition. The next morning, my phone rang before I had even finished breakfast. It was Mr. Lawson. The buyer contacted me. I stood so quickly my chair tipped backward. "What buyer?" "The one your mother eventually sold the dress to." My heart nearly stopped. "He wants to meet." Daniel and I drove almost 3 hours to a quiet little town. The buyer owned a small bridal museum. His name was Thomas Bennett. He welcomed us warmly. "I'm very sorry we had to meet under these circumstances." He led us into a private showroom. There, standing inside a glass display case, was Grandma's wedding dress. Exactly as I remembered it. The pearls shimmered beneath the lights. The lace sleeves looked untouched. For a moment, I couldn't move. It felt like seeing an old friend after believing they were gone forever. Mr. Bennett noticed the tears in my eyes. "I had a feeling." "You knew?" He nodded. "When your mother sold me the dress, something didn't feel right." "What do you mean?" She knew almost nothing about it. She couldn't answer simple questions. She didn't know who designed it. She didn't know how old it was. She didn't even know the stitching technique. He smiled gently. "I've collected heirloom dresses for 30 years. I know when someone is telling the truth." I explained everything. Grandma's letter, the ownership papers, the family betrayal. When I finished, he remained silent for several seconds. Finally, he said, "Eleanor once repaired a Victorian gown for my wife." I blinked. "You knew my grandmother too?" He smiled. "She refused payment. She said preserving family history mattered more than money." His expression softened. "I don't think she'd want her granddaughter to lose this dress." He opened the display case, carefully lifted the dress, and placed it in my arms. Just like that. No argument. No conditions. No negotiations. I held it against my chest and cried harder than I had in weeks. Not because I had one. Because it felt like Grandma had come home. I reached for my purse. "Please tell me how much I owe you." He shook his head. "I can't. You paid for it." "I know. And I'll recover my money elsewhere." He smiled. "Some things are worth more than profit." I insisted. He refused. Finally, he laughed. "If you really want to repay me, wear it. Create happy memories. That's worth far more." The drive home felt different. For the first time since everything began, the pain wasn't leading me anymore. Hope was. Daniel glanced toward the garment bag resting safely in the back seat. "Grandma would have loved this." I smiled. "I think she planned more of this than we realize." 3 days later, Mr. Lawson called again. "Emily, we've received another request." "What kind of request?" "Your mother wants mediation." I almost laughed. "Mediation?" "Yes. She'd like to settle the matter privately." Translation? She didn't want the rest of the family learning the truth. Too late. The meeting took place at the attorney's office. Mom arrived first. Vanessa sat beside her. Neither looked happy. Mom immediately forced a smile. "Sweetheart, I think we've all said things we regret." I stared at her. "You sold my wedding dress." She looked away. "I was trying to help your sister." "No. You were choosing favorites." Again. Just like always. The mediator asked if either side wished to make an opening statement. Mom stood. "I admit I made a mistake. But surely we can move on." She actually expected that to work. Years of manipulation had convinced her that a simple apology erased every consequence. Then it was my turn. I stood quietly, opened Grandma's letter, and read the final paragraph aloud. "Love is never measured by what we take from one child to give another. Real love protects both." The room fell completely silent. Even Vanessa lowered her eyes. I closed the letter. This isn't about the dress anymore. It's about a lifetime. I looked directly at my mother. When Vanessa failed college, you blamed the professors. When she quit jobs, you blamed her bosses. When she overspent, you blamed the economy. But every time something went wrong in my life, you blamed me. She opened her mouth to interrupt. I raised one hand. "No. You've had 30 years to speak. Now it's my turn." I continued. "You didn't sell a dress. You sold trust. You sold memories. You sold the last gift Grandma ever made for me. And somehow, you still expected me to thank you." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I never meant to hurt you." I answered quietly. "Intentions don't erase choices." Then Mr. Lawson placed another document on the table. "The museum owner has transferred ownership back to Emily." He looked toward my mother. "However, he also intends to pursue reimbursement." Mom frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you still owe him every dollar you received." Her face went pale. "And because the ownership documents clearly establish the dress belonged to Emily, the financial responsibility rests entirely with the sellers." Plural. Both sellers. Mom slowly turned toward Vanessa. For the first time, neither woman knew who to blame. Vanessa finally spoke. "You told me it would be fine." Mom stared at her. "You said nobody would ever know." "I trusted you." The irony almost made me laugh. The woman who had happily taken something that wasn't hers was now upset because someone else had lied to her. The mediator quietly ended the meeting. No dramatic shouting. No insults. Just paperwork. Consequences. Reality. As Daniel and I walked toward the parking lot, I heard my mother call my name. I turned around. She stood alone. Vanessa had already left. For the first time, she looked exactly how I had felt my entire childhood. Alone. She took a slow breath. I don't know how to fix this. I looked at her for several seconds, then answered honestly. I don't know if you can. I got into the car, closed the door, and drove away. Not because I hated her, because sometimes walking away is the healthiest decision you can make. That night, I carefully hung Grandma's wedding dress in our bedroom. Daniel smiled. It belongs here. I nodded. It always did. I gently touched the lace sleeve. And for the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Not because justice had been served. Not because my mother had finally faced consequences. But because the one thing Grandma wanted most was finally safe. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt different. Not easier. Just quieter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my mother's approval. I wasn't wondering whether she'd criticize my choices. I wasn't hoping she'd finally treat me the way she treated Vanessa. That hope had finally disappeared. And strangely, losing that hope gave me peace. One evening, Daniel found me sitting on the bedroom floor. Grandma's wedding dress lay carefully across the bed. I gently ran my fingers over the lace sleeves. It still feels unreal, I whispered. Daniel smiled. You got it back. I know. But every time I look at it, I think about Grandma. He sat beside me. I think she'd be proud. I looked at him. You really believe that? I don't believe it. He smiled. I know it. The wedding day arrived faster than either of us expected. The morning sunlight poured through the hotel windows. Bridesmaids hurried from room to room. Hairstylists laughed. Someone accidentally dropped a box of flowers. The room buzzed with excitement. Yet somehow, everything felt peaceful. As the makeup artist finished, she looked at my dress. I've never seen anything like it. I smiled. My grandmother made it. She gently touched one of the tiny pearls. You can tell. It was made with love. Those words nearly made me cry again. A few minutes before the ceremony, Mr. Lawson arrived unexpectedly. He handed me a small envelope. Your grandmother left one final letter. I was instructed to give it to you only on your wedding day. My hands trembled as I opened it. My beautiful granddaughter. If you're reading this, then today is the happiest day of your life. When you walk down that aisle, remember something. The dress is beautiful, but it is not what makes you beautiful. Your kindness does. Your courage does. Your heart does. Never let another person's jealousy convince you otherwise. I couldn't hold back the tears. Grandma wasn't there. But somehow, she was. The music began. The chapel doors slowly opened. Everyone stood. I took one deep breath, then walked forward. Every step felt lighter than the last. Not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because I wasn't carrying years of disappointment anymore. I had finally let them go. Daniel smiled the moment he saw me. Later he admitted, he wasn't looking at the dress. He was looking at my face. Because for the first time since we'd met, I looked completely at peace. The ceremony was simple, beautiful, exactly what we wanted. No dramatic speeches, no expensive decorations, just family, friends, and love. One chair remained empty, Grandma's. Instead of flowers, we placed her favorite sewing scissors on the seat, along with a framed photograph of her smiling. Several guests quietly cried when they noticed. Even I had to look away. As the ceremony ended, everyone applauded. For a brief moment, I forgot every painful thing that had happened. Then I noticed movement near the back of the chapel. My mother. She had arrived late. Alone. Vanessa wasn't with her. She quietly sat in the last row. She didn't interrupt. She didn't speak. She simply watched. During the reception, people laughed. Children danced. Old friends shared memories. For once, no one was arguing. No one was comparing daughters. No one was competing for attention. It felt like the kind of family gathering I'd always wished for. About an hour later, Mom slowly approached me. She looked nervous. I had never seen her nervous before. She held a small wrapped box. "I know I don't deserve your time." I remained silent. "I wanted to give you something." I carefully opened the package. Inside was Grandma's old silver thimble, the one she always wore while sewing. I looked up. I found it in her sewing room. Mom's voice shook. "I should have given it to you years ago." I gently closed the box. "Thank you." Those were the only words I could honestly say. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I've spent weeks asking myself why I always favored Vanessa. I didn't answer, because that wasn't my question to solve. She continued. "I think I confused protecting her with loving her. And I confused expecting more from you with believing you didn't need love." She broke down crying. I was wrong. Very wrong. For the first time. She wasn't making excuses. She wasn't blaming stress. She wasn't blaming money. She wasn't blaming anyone else. She was accepting responsibility. That mattered. But it didn't erase the past. "I don't expect forgiveness," she whispered. "I know. I just wanted you to hear me say, I'm sorry. Real sorry. Not because everyone found out. Because I finally understand what I took from you." I looked at her for a long moment, then quietly replied, "I forgive you." Her eyes widened. "But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was." She nodded. "I understand. And trust. It has to be earned." She wiped away another tear. "I know. For the first time in my life, we were speaking honestly. Not as mother and daughter trapped in old roles, but as two adults facing the truth." Months passed. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Daniel and I returned from our own modest honeymoon. Nothing extravagant. A quiet cabin near the mountains. Long walks. Coffee on the porch. Peace. It was perfect. Not because it was expensive. Because we were together. Vanessa's marriage, however, wasn't doing well. Without my mother constantly rescuing her, reality caught up quickly. She had to find a full-time job. She had to budget. She had to face the consequences of her own choices for the first time in her life. I didn't celebrate her struggles. I simply hoped she would finally grow. As for my mother, she started attending family counseling. Not because anyone forced her. Because she realized she'd spent decades damaging the very family she claimed to protect. Recovery was slow. Sometimes awkward. Sometimes painful. But it was real. One Sunday afternoon, several months later, she visited our house. Not with gifts. Not with excuses. She simply brought homemade cookies. Exactly the way Grandma used to. We sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. Mostly in silence. Sometimes, silence is where healing begins. A year later, Daniel and I welcomed our first daughter. When I held her for the first time, one promise echoed inside my heart. She will never wonder if she's enough. She will never compete for my love. She will never believe she has to earn my affection. Because love isn't supposed to be divided. It's supposed to be multiplied. Grandma's wedding dress now hangs safely inside a special glass cabinet in our home. Not because I want to protect fabric. Because I want to protect the story. One day, I'll tell my daughter about the woman who made it. A woman who believed love should never be measured by favoritism. A woman who quietly prepared the truth long before anyone needed it. A woman who taught me the greatest lesson of my life. Looking back, people often ask if I regret exposing my mother. The answer is simple. No, because I wasn't trying to destroy my family. I was trying to stop living inside a lie. Sometimes, the truth breaks relationships. Sometimes, it saves them. In my case, it did both. And if my grandmother were here today, I think she'd smile. Adjust one final pearl on my wedding dress. Take my hands and remind me of the words she always said. The most valuable thing you'll ever wear isn't silk or lace. It's self-respect. And, from that day forward, I never let anyone take that away from me again. Moral of the story: love should never come at the cost of fairness. Parents who play favorites don't just hurt one child, they wound the entire family. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the first step toward breaking a cycle and creating a healthier future.